Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, the side event on mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction in the Asia-Pacific region will begin quite soon. So if you don't mind, could you please take a seat? And we would like to start soon. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a warm welcome to the side event on mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction in the Asia-Pacific region, paving the way to the Third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction. As we expect the panelists to arrive within the next few minutes, may I request all of you to take your seats, please? May I also request all of you to have your mobile phones turned off or put on silent mode during this occasion. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, the side event on mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction in the Asia-Pacific region, paving the way to the Third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction will now begin. It's my honor to invite His Excellency Mr. Mitsugu Saito, Minister and Deputy Chief of Mission and the Permanent Representative to ESCAP from the Embassy of Japan to deliver the opening remarks. Sir.
Thank you very much. So I'll just briefly make opening remarks. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the side event co-chaired by Japan and ESCAP. This year marks the 60th anniversary of Japan's accession to ESCAP in 1954. Indeed, that is older than my age. It was even before it was even before the Japanese membership of the United Nations. Commemorating this Japanese long relationship with ESCAP, I'm pleased to announce the opening of Maintaining of Disaster Risk Reduction in the Asia-Pacific region. This event, paving the way to the World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai, Japan, in March next year. We expect that not only the honorable speakers and panelists, but also the distinguished audience could contribute to the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would now like to pass the floor to the Executive Secretary of ESCAP and Under Secretary General of the United Nations, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, who will moderate this session. Madam, floor is yours.
Thank you, Shamika. I'd like to, at the outset, thank Japan for their excellent cooperation and collaboration. And as Mr. Saito said, that we have a long-standing relationship and association with Japan, which was renewed during my current visit to Japan, which was a delightful visit, and we had very good exchange. So I'd like to formally welcome you all to this important event. As you know, this is focused on mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in Asia-Pacific region. This is a valuable opportunity for all of us to share the region's experience as we ramp up efforts ahead of the Third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, which will be hosted by the government of Japan in Sendai in March 2015, and I have already given my commitment to be there. Today's event also serves to commemorate, as Mr. Saito mentioned, 60th anniversary of Japan's accession to ESCAP. And as I said, I deeply appreciate our relationship. I have just, when I went to Japan recently, we had the opportunity to ensure that both sides were in sync, and there was a mutual reaffirmation of the strong partnership between ESCAP and Japanese government, which came out to be much more stronger in natural disasters risk reduction. This is a very high priority of Japan, I was advised. Before I end my introductory remarks, I'd like to extend my very special and warm thanks to Minister Kihara, the Parliamentarian Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, for taking the time to join us today for this special occasion. And I'd like to extend my special thanks to Japan for all the assistance provided to ESCAP. Over to you.
Thank you very much. The very warm remarks and introduction, Madam Akhtal. Thank you so much. At the outset, in the wake of the tragic earthquake occurred in Yunnan province in China, on behalf of the government and people of Japan, I express my heartfelt sympathy and condolences to the government and people of China. Japan is ready to offer as much assistance as needed, and I pray that the affected region will recover as soon as possible. Now, I would like to thank all of you for joining us at this wonderful side event, and also my special gratitude go to, again, Madam Akhtal as a moderator, and distinguished panelists for sharing your knowledge and experience at this event. Today's theme is the disaster risk reduction, DRR, one of Japan's highest priorities in international cooperation. ESCAP also, too, has played a significant role in enhancing disaster countermeasures in the Asia-Pacific region through its Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction. Thus, I feel it's quite natural that Japan and ESCAP host the side event on DRR in this 60th anniversary of Japan's membership in ESCAP. Japan has been a strong advocate for tsunami preparedness and highly value ESCAP for the establishment of the Trust Fund for Tsunami, Disaster and Climate Preparedness in 2005 to build a tsunami early warning system in the Asia-Pacific region. To further strengthen cooperation toward resilient Asian-Pacific region, today I will announce that Japan will make its first financial contribution to this trust fund. As the recent earthquake in Yunnan province vividly reminded us, at any time and place, disaster occurs, causing loss of many human lives and damage to the economy. In order to raise awareness and enhance cooperation at global arena, Japan has twice hosted the UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in the past. The first one in 1994 and the second in 2005. The Hyogo Framework for Action adopted at the second UN World Conference has served as a global guideline for national implementation of DRR measures in each country. Following on from the two previous meetings, in March 2015, the third UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction will be held in Sendai, Japan. The conference will establish a framework for disaster risk reduction as a successor of Hyogo Framework in order to respond to new challenges to disasters, such as growing urbanization resulting from rapid population increase, climate change, of course, and an expanding global economy. As the international community engaged in intensive discussion on shaping the post-2015 development agenda, the integration of disaster risk reduction perspectives in the development policy and planning is critical, since a disaster hampers long-term efforts for poverty eradication and sustainable development. The establishment of a new DRR framework in Sendai and the clear introduction of disaster risk reduction in the post-2015 development agenda are two important goals in 2015 in mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in development. In order to achieve this, we need commitment from all corners of the world, including the Asia Pacific. The third UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai, which is one cities greatly affected by the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami in the March 2011, will be, I think, the golden opportunity for Japan to share the lessons learned from the earthquake to build a more resilient society. practical effort for reconstruction under the principle of 3 Bs, building back better, such as a re-examination of the land use plans, relocation of residences and communities to a higher ground will be introduced at the conference. The conference will also be an opportunity for all participating countries to share their experiences and knowledges on disaster they have gone through. We hope that active discussion will be conducted in such areas as investment in disaster risk reduction, protection of the vulnerable people, and empowerment of their ability, enhancement of early warning and disaster response preparedness, and reinforcement of the governance structure of at national and local level. In addition, on the margin of the conference, various side events and study tours to the disaster-affected area will be organized to let people witness firsthand the ongoing reconstruction and efforts for disaster risk reduction. Last but not least, participation from the high-level representatives, such as head of government and ministers, as well as high-profile practitioners, are critical for the success of this conference. Thus, on behalf of the government of Japan, I would like to call for all of you to dispatch, please, high-level representative to this event. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. It is an honor for me to now introduce our distinguished panel of speakers. They hail from countries that have made it a national priority to strengthen their resilience to natural disasters, and we are fortunate to have this unique opportunity to benefit from their valuable experiences. I'd like to first turn on my left to His Excellency Mr. Jin Yao, Deputy Minister of Ministry of Transport, Government of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. Second, I'd like to introduce to my second to my right, Mrs. Kanchana Padrachok, Acting Director General, Department of International Organization, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Royal Thai Government, a very special colleague because of her extensive support to ESCAP that she offers on a day-to-day basis too. I'd like to also introduce, second to my left, Mr. Kunio Okamura, Senior Special Advisor from the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Last but not the least, I've already introduced you, His Excellency Shiji Kehara, Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Government of Japan, who has a standing offer to speak at any time he wishes to. In preparing for this event, I have asked distinguished panelists to reflect on how their own country's experiences have affected the way it addresses natural disasters, and specifically how the country places disaster risk reduction in development planning. Further, I've asked the panelists to consider how they engage with a broad range of stakeholders, such as local governments, communities, the private sector, and the civil society, and to identify the main challenges faced by the international community in addressing the growing impact and risk of disasters. So my first question will go to His Excellency Mr. Kehara. Japan is a leader in disaster risk reduction, and as you highlighted, will host the 3rd World Conference in Sendai in March 2015. It would be very helpful for all of us if you could share some of the characteristics of a resilient nation and explain how this brings inspiration to the expected outcomes of the World Conference. over to you. You have 8 minutes.
8 minutes, okay. Thank you so much once again to introduce the very important World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai next year. What is most important, our purpose to host this World Conference is very simply to mainstream DRR in the international development policy and planning. And what is very important, I believe, I would like to touch upon 3 issues here. First, what is very important to mainstream DRR is political and international commitment for DRR. And Japan would like to take advantage of hosting this World Conference, which is a good opportunity to adopt the successor framework for Hyogo Action Plan. And also, if we can accommodate the very top leaders from all the participating countries, this will be a great opportunity to enhance the political commitment as well. And based on this international and political commitment, we would like to prioritize the DRR perspective in all the development policies and development plan at each country's policy level and also the local level. And also to ask all government to allocate adequate budget for DRR perspective. And finally, what we would like to do is to have the case for statistical and very logical thinking about the importance of infrastructure investment for disaster risk reduction. It is very important for all people all over the world, and also at national level and also at local level, to understand the importance and the effectiveness of the DRR investment in infrastructure. So our purpose is to let all people, all participants in the World Conference on DRR next year to understand the importance of this infrastructure investment for DRR. So I will finish at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you for your effective time management. Now I have the privilege to offer a few remarks on behalf of ESCAP. First of all, as I have done before also, I'd like to reiterate that to be doing this jointly with Japan. And I'd like to start in the context of Minister Kihara's comments by reflecting on regional lessons that can be drawn from the Japanese experience of mainstreaming disaster risk reduction. Our assessment is that Japan has made tremendous efforts to enhance its resilience to natural disasters, be it earthquakes, tsunamis, or typhoons, and it offers a model for developing effective policies and pragmatic approaches to disaster risk reduction. Japan's experience, as well as that of other countries in the region, has taught us that while not all natural disasters can be avoided, their impact can be mitigated through effective planning and preparedness. In Japan, many lives have been saved by investments and good practices. In particular, what I'm very impressed with is the strict building codes and other measures to ensure resilient infrastructure. I think this is number one safety net that you can offer to your citizens. Second, the use of hazard and risk information for critical decision making. And 3, the development of the systems for early warning and emergency responses. I recall after the tsunami in Indonesia, when I was working from Asian Development Bank, we invested a lot on the early warning signals because lives could have been saved if only early warning signal had been offered to the local community in time, at least nearer the coastal area. I was very much involved personally in the work of post-tsunami because I was at that time the Director General in Asian Development Bank handling Indonesia amongst other countries. The great East Japan earthquake of March 2011 was a tragic reminder, as the current one in China has been, and the others that have happened before that, that actually no country is completely safe from natural disasters. This is one event that doesn't knock the door, it just comes as you're standing. I remember as a child, I witnessed my first earthquake. I didn't know what an earthquake was, and the whole building shook, and it can be very shocking for young kids in my view. So I have a very living memory that there is no warning and everybody is in different places. So I repeat again, the early warning to me is the most important, and also training the population on building an awareness of it. Despite the enormous impact, where more than 15,800 people were killed, and there has been a damage of about 210 billion, the devastation could have been worse had it not been for the high levels of resilience built up by Japan and its people. Another lesson is that everyone needs to participate in disaster prevention, mitigation, and building defense mechanisms to reduce risks. Besides public awareness and participation, as observed in Great East Japan earthquake, there are some lessons to be learned from the Japanese private sector as well, especially in terms of the role in preparing for and responding to disasters in partnership with governments and other anchors. In particular, Japan's model of risk financing by engaging private insurance companies is an innovative practice of public-private partnership from which the region could learn. Let me now take a few minutes to talk about Asia-Pacific experience in disaster risk reduction. Besides Japan, of course, I think nowhere are the lessons in effective disaster risk reduction more important than right here in Asia and the Pacific as a whole region. Natural disasters continue to take a heavy toll on the region and threaten to undermine our hard-won development gains. In 2013, 9 out of the 10 deadliest disasters in the world struck in Asia and the Pacific. This includes Typhoon Haiyan, which killed more than 6,000 people in the Philippines and also affected Vietnam and China. This again reminds me of a personal story that when I arrived in Manila upon joining Asian Development Bank, I was, I think it was the second day of my being in the city, and I was doing house search with a real estate agent, and suddenly water started to come into the city of Manila. Again, never seen a flood in my life. I said, what's going on here? So they told me, well, this is floods, but you know, floods are normal in Philippines. But I said, what kind of flood is it? You know, I am sitting right into the urban city center. This is the Rojas Boulevard, where the old building of Asian Development Bank was. The water came up till here. we had to rush, and we took refuge in the building of Asian Development Bank for the whole night until the water receded. So I have witnessed a lot of these things. I'm just sharing this with you because it's the awareness which is important to build. Given the high level of risk, our region must act to strengthen our resilience to natural disasters and to enhance regional cooperation. Good work is already being done, and Asia-Pacific is fast becoming a hub for good practices and innovation in the field of disaster risk reduction. This global leadership role of our region needs to be highlighted at the World Conference in Sendai. And I have a commitment that ESCAP will definitely support this, not only by the presence of our ESCAP staff and myself, but also do some special background work to support Japan. Now, a word about ESCAP's role. Japan and a number of other Asia-Pacific countries have done well in mainstreaming disaster risk reduction. Part of the ESCAP's role is to promote these positive experiences to the rest of the region. So let me highlight only a few examples of our work. First, mainstreaming disaster risk reduction across ministries and sectors. Drawing on the lessons I just outlined, ESCAP uses its multidisciplinary approach to take disaster risk reduction into finance and planning, ministries, central banks, and the private sector. Our focus is on analytical work to make a convincing case for mainstreaming disaster, especially how much public expenditure and investments is needed for a given level of risk. Guidelines for mainstreaming disaster risks into critical sectors, especially environment, infrastructure, and social sectors, and the ways and means of protecting supply chains, especially SMEs. We have to also emphasize that disasters and climate risks often have transboundary origins and impacts which require regional solutions. ESCAP and WMO collaboration through the Typhoon Committee and panel on tropical cyclone has helped substantially enhance the regional capacity of preparedness. When we talk about transboundary, when Pinatubo event occurred in Philippines, if you recall, the ashes went across the board to Singapore and several other countries, and the ashes were quite bad because they hurted your eyes very severely. Number two item that our division is positioned for is serving as a regional platform for cooperation and knowledge sharing to align strategies in disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and sustainable development. A third area where ESCAP, through our office, special division, is working on developing a core set of disaster statistics following Resolution 70/2 passed by the Commission. ESCAP, with support of regional statistical commissions, is working towards establishing a core set of disaster statistics that is common to all the countries in the region. This work will build on solid base for evidence-based decision-making, including on future investments in resilience. A fourth area is applying science and technology for disaster risk reduction. Disasters are becoming larger, increasingly complex, and more unpredictable in Asia and the Pacific. Tackling this rapidly evolving pattern of risks requires us to apply the latest innovations in science and technology to disaster risk reduction. Through ESCAP's long-standing regional cooperation mechanism, RESAP, we have I'm just calling it by short name, but it's regional cooperation mechanism. We have taken steps to assist countries in the immediate aftermath of disasters by sharing near real-time satellite imagery and data, which has been highly appreciated by the affected governments. ESCAP has also helped countries enhance their monitoring of floods and droughts and strengthen their institutional capacity to use space technologies and GIS. I have to thank China for its kind support to help us achieve this. A fifth area where we have been working is to actually strengthen the early warning that I talked about. We continue to find gaps in this area, and the more we work in this area, the better it will be to mitigate the consequences and damages. Following the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, ESCAP established the Multi-Donor Trust Fund for Tsunami, Disaster and Climate Preparedness with generous financial support from the government of Thailand. The Trust Fund has built up an excellent track record in strengthening end-to-end multi-hazard early warning systems. Since 2005, it has supported 23 projects with a total budget of about 13 million, directly benefiting 19 Indian Ocean and Southeast Asian countries. For example, the Trust Fund contributed substantially to the establishment of Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System in 2011, which is projected to save on average 1,000 lives per year over the next 100 years. In this context, I would like to thank the government of Japan for its contribution to the Trust Fund, which was announced already? Okay. By Minister Kihara, and look forward to Japan's active participation in the Fund's Advisory Council. To conclude, I'd like to emphasize that mainstreaming disaster risk reduction into development process is a regional imperative as we move towards the finalization and subsequent implementation of post-2015 development agenda. So with this, I would now like to introduce the rest of our panelists and then request them to share their perspectives. Sorry, I just have to organize myself in a minute. So let me first now call on the Deputy Minister, Mr. Yao, who is now a well-known name in this hall because he spoke at the Regional Connectivity Session too. So my question to you is, I apologize, my papers are a little upside down. Myanmar has made great strides to strengthen its disaster risk reduction efforts, working with the rest of the region and with partners such as ASEAN and ESCAP. I would very much appreciate your advice on how has Myanmar gone about enhancing disaster risk reduction, especially early warning. Thank you. Over to you. Sorry about this.
Thank you,
Please.
Madam. And good afternoon, Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the government of Japan and ESCAP for organizing this event. I am honored to have the opportunity to share with you our perspectives from the Republic of the Union of Myanmar implementing disaster risk reduction. Myanmar is exposed to a wide range of natural hazards, including tropical cyclones, storm surge, floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, and droughts. In the period from 2002 to 2012, more than 2.5 million people were affected by tropical cyclones, 500,000 were affected by floods, and many others by many small and medium-scale disasters. These events have enormous economic consequences and threaten to undermine hard-won development gains. In Myanmar's experience, risk reduction and preparedness, including early warning, are critical to saving lives and protecting assets. Since Cyclone Nargis in 2008, which killed over 138,000 people, significant progress has been made in building resilience. This was illustrated by the response to Cyclone Kiri, which hit Rakhine State in October 2010. Kiri caused significant damage to people's housing and livelihoods, but the impact was mitigated by the effective early warning and preparedness actions, including evacuations of tens of thousands of vulnerable people through collaboration between the government, UN agency, the Red Cross movement, international and local NGOs, and the other partners. Our government is committed to mainstream disaster risk reduction and is taking action in this regard. Under the new 2008 Constitution, the National Disaster Preparedness Central Committee adopted the Myanmar Action Plan on Disaster Risk Reduction for 2009 to 2015 to provide a framework for implementing Myanmar's commitments at the national, regional, and global level. Further, the Myanmar Disaster Management Law on 2013 was ratified to provide the legal framework for disaster risk reduction in all sectors. Currently, the Myanmar Building Code is being revised by the Ministry of Construction with the aim of having it ready for the implementation of the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015. Meanwhile, the establishment of the National Training Center and the implementation of the new disaster management training curriculum are also on the way. Regionally, Myanmar is the current chair of the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management and an active member state in the ESCAP Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction. In response to your question, Madam Executive Secretary, I would like to expand more on what is being done to strengthen early warning systems for natural disaster in Myanmar with the support from partners such as ESCAP and JICA. For countries that are at high risk, have limited domestic capacity, regional cooperation is indispensable. Therefore, Myanmar is an active member of the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System, which became fully operational in 2011. Myanmar also hosted the 68th session of the WMO ESCAP panel on tropical cyclone in 2012, and is working with a member of the panel as well as the Typhoon Committee to develop multi-hazard standard operating procedures for coastal hazards with the support from the ESCAP Multi-Donor Trust Fund for Tsunami, Disaster, and Climate Preparedness. The ESCAP Trust Fund has provided vital support for building institutional capacity for early warning in Myanmar. For example, with support from the Trust Fund, technical staff from the Department of Meteorology and Hydrology, which is under the Ministry of Transport, received extensive training in seismic monitoring, analysis, and tsunami warning at the facility regionally integrated multi-hazard early warning system for Africa and Asia, RIMES, here in Thailand. With funding from ESCAP, RIMES is also building the capacity of the Myanmar National Hydrographic Center, the Department of Land Survey, and the Department of Meteorology and Hydrology is undertaking tsunami risk assessment and mapping through training and transfer of equipment, software, systems, and manuals. The ESCAP Trust Fund has helped strengthen the early warning infrastructure nationally and regionally through the establishment of a real-time seismic station in the coastal town of Sidwe in Myanmar. At the same time, similar stations were established in Vietnam and the Philippines, filling important gaps in the regional and national warning system and helping to ensure that information is quickly transmitted and analyzed to produce timely warnings for families and communities at risk of tsunamis. My government is grateful to the ESCAP Trust Fund for this valuable support. My government is also grateful to the JICA for their intensive assistance to our country. JICA is supporting the Grant Aid project for establishment of disastrous weather monitoring system to DMH. This project started in 2013 and will continue to 2017. Under this project, 3 weather radars will be established in Chao Phu, Yangon, and Mandalay, and 30 sets of automatic weather observing systems will be installed in the most needed area. After completion of this project, DMH will have significantly enhanced capabilities to achieve effective disaster risk reduction. JICA also supported the end-to-end early warning system project for Myanmar, under which selected pilot areas at the southwestern tips of Ayeyarwady Delta region will be connected to optical fiber links for distribution of warning messages from DMH to Myanmar radio and television station. A set of SSB transceiver will also be installed at the project area. Despite the progress made, I would like to stress that there are still significant gaps in early warning at the regional as well as the national level. In the future, I have to receive additional trust fund support specifically to increase the availability data used for early warning in Myanmar, and to improve warning generation and dissemination down to the local level through exercises, testing, and SOP development. These are critical areas where international support can make a major difference in building resilience and thus help protect lives and livelihoods. With your permission, Madam Executive Secretary, I would like to end my remarks today with a brief video prepared jointly by the government of Myanmar and RIMES to further demonstrate the role of Sidwe seismic station in the early warning system. Thank you.
By all means.
Myanmar lies on the earthquake belt of the Himalayan range. 15 earthquakes with magnitudes greater than 7.0 have been observed in Myanmar in the past 100 years. These are mainly from the Sagaing Fault, which runs from north to south of the country, passing through the central region, and the Sunda-Andaman subduction zone, which runs parallel to Myanmar's coastal areas. Seismic observations are hence important in improving knowledge of seismic and tsunami hazards in the country, and application of this knowledge for reducing disaster risks. Processed by the data center's 24/7 staffs using SeisCompi. These staffs have been trained under an ongoing RIMES project with support from the ESCAP Multi-Donor Trust Fund.
CMAs issue the earthquake news and tsunami warning according to our standard operating procedure. DMH also provides the earthquake news and tsunami warning to President and Office, Ministry of Transport, and other concerning Ministry of Information, local governments, and local DMH station. After receiving this information, local governments, other government organizations, and NGO will carry out to take the necessary action.
With station ownership transferred from ESCAP to the Department of Meteorology and Hydrology on the 27th of November 2013, the government of Myanmar takes full responsibility for the operation and maintenance of the Situé seismic station. Through ESCAP-supported project that established the Situé station, key DMH technical staffs have been trained on station maintenance. The station contributes to the system's core network of seismic stations in the region, filling an important gap in the regional tsunami warning system.
Thank you, Madam. The floor is yours.
Thank you. A very graphic video and very well casted. I'll now turn to our third panelist, Ms. Kanchana, who is the Acting Director General, as I said, of the Department of International Organization. Ms. Kanchana, you in Thailand has been severely affected by floods in 2011. How have the floods changed the way Thailand deals with disasters, especially working with all relevant stakeholders to put disasters on everyone's agenda? Having just successfully hosted the Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, how is Thailand's experience shaping the regional agenda for Sendai in your view?
Thank you, Executive Secretary, and good afternoon to everyone. Sawadika and welcome to Thailand. Since I'm from the host government, so I like to use this opportunity to welcome everybody once again. It's very nice to have you here in Thailand during this political transition we have, so you can witness for yourself that the situation in Thailand remains normal as before. So welcome. I have only 8 minutes. So I was thinking this is even more challenging than dealing with disaster risk reduction. But anyway, last night, so I consulted, it's a multi-stakeholder effort. So I consulted with my husband, who works for a private company, which actually put a lot of efforts into disaster risk reduction, and also they took part in the flood management during the flood in 2011 that we had. So we had come up with some points. So this is a result of brainstorming from public and private sector partnership. Okay, I have only 2 points to make, in fact. One is why the disaster is now on top of our national agenda. It's in everybody's mind. After the flood in 2011, everyone knows that this is not something alien to us. Disaster is very directly affecting everybody. At the time, just to share with you my personal story too, in 2011, my mom passed away in June, and we had this flood in December. You know, during the flood, everybody has to, everybody in Bangkok especially, they were affected one way or another. So people had to migrate from their home. My mom lives in our house is in the suburb of Bangkok. Even in the suburb of Bangkok, we had to migrate to other areas in Bangkok. I was thinking at the time, my God, this is so fortunate that mom had passed away already, because she was 91 years old at the time. And if she had to migrate from her home to other areas of the city, it would have been a trauma for her. So that was one way to explain to you that the flood in 2011 actually touched on everybody's life, you know, in Bangkok and in other provinces as well. In my area of the city, we live very nearby to here, about 15 minutes from here. I was not affected directly by the flood, but even in 7-Eleven convenience store, we were running out of water, bottled water, so people were stocking up things in their home just to make sure that they have enough supplies to keep them in their household for like a month or so. The flood lasted for like 2 months. And I have a colleague who didn't come into work for like 2 months, and she was running out of supplies at her home too. This is why disaster has become on top of our national agenda. So no need to work on anything. People had their direct experience to know that this is something important and that we need to mainstream disaster risk reduction into development, into investment, and into planning. That's one thing we have learned. And we have learned that floods or drought or any kind of disaster is not an event, it's not a standalone event. We need to prepare for it, we need to prevent it, and we need to make sure that we can prepare for effective response for this crisis whenever it happens, whether they are man-made or natural disasters. So we need to plan for the future. The second lesson that we have learned is about the importance of community resilience, and this is I echo from Madam Executive Secretary and also from Minister Kihara. Community resilience is very important because at the time of disaster or crisis, you look to people close to your home, you look to your neighbors, you cannot look to somewhere else. So we need people nearby to help out each other first. Even for the private sector, they need to help. They say they have this philosophy of helping their own employees first. If you help your own employees, and then your own employees gain strength, and then they can even help people in their own communities. I remember at the time, my husband's company, they migrated to Rayong province, and they sort of booked the whole hotel, 1,000 rooms for their employees. And they set up a hotline center to work to help the families of their own employees. And then the employees actually went out to help communities. This is something that is very important. So we strengthen individuals, we strengthen communities, we strengthen our organizations, and by that way of building strength units by units, we can create the national resilience. Also, one thing that we have learned from the flood in 2011 is that information is very important. You need transparent information. You need people to access to information, accurate information, and that is why we thank ESCAP for going to increase the work on data and statistics. This is important to make informed policy decisions. In 2011, for us, it was very confusing. Who are we going to trust? The government information is one thing, and then you have academics, people coming out and saying that the water flow is coming here and there. And so we couldn't prepare ourselves in a timely manner. Sometimes, people actually had to leave their home less than 2 or 3 hours to go to other places because the information was not accessible, it was not accurate enough. This is a lesson that we have learned well. So we can make sure that in the next flood or in the next disaster that Thailand is going to experience, we're going to have credible information to make informed decisions. Also, the critical infrastructures, schools, hospitals, these are important. We need these infrastructures to be resilient and to be able to absorb shocks from disasters. Also, infrastructure must be constructed with universal design. We need to make sure that the disabled, the elderly, they can get help. They can go out, help themselves, and they can also have access to help. I was just in Japan about 2 weeks ago, and I met this non-governmental organization representative from Fukushima. He told a very fascinating story. He told a story about why we need to help the elderly first and the disabled, because if you don't help these people, they are the ones who are going to to be affected most, even during disaster and post-disaster time, because if they refuse to leave their home and if there is no information to access to them, they're going to suffer from malnutrition and not having basic necessities to help themselves. And that's one thing that we need to keep in mind. Also, we need early warning mechanism. We need response preparedness training. We need communities to actually have exercise and drills to make sure that once the disaster strike you, the flood or earthquake or landslide comes, they can get help. And we need to ensure that protection is given to the most vulnerable groups. Also, another important lesson we have learned is about business continuity management. I remember about 3 or 4 months after the flood, the government actually mandated every single government agency to come up with business continuity management. So we want to make sure that if we are hit by a flood again, we have to close down our office for 1 or 2 months so we can continue on working. And actually, the business continuity management plan that government offices have put in place have come to be very useful during the past years when our government offices were closed down because of the political situation. So we were quite resilient and flexible. Ministry of Foreign Affairs was closed down for about 2 or 3 months, and Madam Executive Secretary came in February, I remember, and she couldn't, you couldn't come in to call us at the ministry, but we work outside the ministry, so our online system was so good we can remain outside the ministry for a long, long time and work, so I recommend you to work online. And then on the soft side, I would just end by saying on the soft side, one thing that we have learned from the crisis is that during the time of the crisis, we come to realize our potential. We have this enormous capacity, ability, and potential to do more. Things that we take time to do during the normal time, we can do it more quickly during the crisis time. And we need to be able to make effective use of this realized potential in the post-crisis time too. Another thing is that we need to cultivate a caring culture, and this we observe with great admiration from the example of Japan. During the tsunami and the earthquake in Japan, Thai people look on TV and we see Japanese people, even during this difficult time, they lined up to go buy food, to get help. And this is something that you need to cultivate. You need a caring culture that people respect each other, and people can have this service mind, the public mind to help other people. So this is what we intend to do, to create awareness for our people and to instill in them a sense of helping each other. So that way, when disaster comes again, we are fully ready to respond to it.
Our final speaker, panelist, Mr. Kunio Okumura. As I said, he's the Senior Special Advisor of JICA. Mr. Okumura, UN organizations, international financial institutions, and donor countries are playing a very important role in providing development assistance. So how can they support mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction and demonstrate its importance for achieving sustainable development and poverty eradication? The second question I have is that given that it is not always easy to visualize the impact of investments in disaster risk reduction, how do these institutions justify such investments to their own stakeholders, including taxpayers, and ensuring proper accountability? So this over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Akhtar. And my gratitude must be also addressed to my previous speakers who kindly mentioned the name of JICA and the history in Japan. Indeed, it is my great honor and pleasure to be here as a panelist with eminent participants for this important side event. I will try to make my presentation in responding to your two key questions. First, mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction, and second, rationality of the investment for disaster risk reduction. I have here PowerPoint material, but because of time constraint, I'll show you just the page related to these 2 points. First one, with regard to the mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction, we are saying that it is not just one subject, but cross-cutting issue for the sake of the development of the country. It is indispensable for sustainable development, poverty eradication, and a resilient society, all important aspects for human security. When we explain this mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction to our partner countries, there are 3 main points to be considered. Number 1, government should place disaster risk reduction as one of their priorities for development. Number 2, disaster risk reduction must be taken into account for every project of all sectors. Number 3, budget allocation must be secured for the investment for disaster risk reduction. As development aid agency, JICA has been supporting this mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction to our partner countries. In which way? Concretely, in aiming for the following 5 targets. Target 1, establishment and strengthening of disaster management system. It is important to prepare not only hard structure, but also soft component, clarifying who or which organization is responsible for what in a country or region by improving basic laws and regulations. Probably it includes building code. Related to disaster risk reduction and establishing organizational structure responsible for disaster risk reduction, strengthening disaster risk reduction administrative functions of central and also local government by formulating its plan of the country or regions to build cooperation system between public and private sector, and related organization is also important. We have been cooperating this aspect in Thailand, this country, the Philippines, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Fiji, Solomon, etc. Target 2, correct understanding of natural disaster risk and promotion of common understanding. Correct understanding of disaster risk is prerequisite and fundamental for deciding on disaster risk reduction measures. In many countries, we are cooperating to prepare hazard maps, for example. We are also supporting disaster education to promote understanding of risk to a wide range of people. Target 3, implementation of risk reduction measures for sustainable development. After the understanding of disaster risk, we support concrete risk reduction measures such as flood prevention measures or earthquake-resilient primary schools, for example. Once again, we try to make our cooperation in balancing structural and non-structural measures. Target 4, speedy and effective preparation and response. Up to now, I explained 3 targets of actions in advance, but unfortunately, even though it is impossible to avoid damage of 100% caused by natural disaster, so it is important to respond with better preparedness immediately before and after the occurrence of natural disasters. Quick dissemination of the forecast and warning information, and once a disaster occurs, immediately provide relief to victims and suffered areas. JICA is conducting the supports in providing facilities with necessary capacity building training, such as weather radar equipment always together with weather-focused training, and also in dispatching rescue and medical teams as well as emergency relief supplies. Target 5, seamless recovery and reconstruction for disaster-resilient society. Based on the lessons of JICA's past experiences, that emergency relief and recovery activities were interdependently conducted with insufficient coordination. We have been making efforts to provide supports immediately after disaster and conduct seamless recovery activities and provide speedy support to meet the needs of the affected area. And when planning recovery and reconstruction activities after disaster, we consider necessary to approach for rebuilding not to the same as before disaster, but to a disaster-resilient society under the concept of Build Back Better. In case of terrible disaster made by Typhoon Yolanda in Philippines, we try to make this seamless recovery, and the Philippine government applied the concept of Build Back Better in reconstruction for disaster-resilient society. Now, I move to the second question. What you said is true, Madam Akhtar. It is not always easy to visualize the impact of investment in disaster risk reduction, whereas loss and damage caused by natural disaster is quite clear. People go through human sufferings and economic damages, and then sustainable development of the disaster-affected countries has been often, unfortunately, cut off. In order to end this negative spiral of poverty and disaster, and as a consequence, minimize disaster damage, it is necessary to clarify the effectiveness of the investment for disaster risk reduction. Outside of this room, there is a stand of the trust fund of the ESCAP. It is saying that $1 invested in disaster prevention and preparedness saves $7. $1 saves $7 in response and recovery efforts. Recently, Ms. Helen Clark, President of UNDP, mentioned at the publication of this year's flagship report, Human Development Report, that the victims by the cyclone hit Bangladesh in 1991 was about 140,000 people. But same-scale cyclone hit this country again in 2007, made 4,000 victims. Thanks to shelters and evacuation route made and prepared during that period. To justify the investment for disaster risk reduction, disaster risk analysis, including hazard maps, is very convincing in many cases, but still, there would be a question that, economically speaking, to what extent as an investment disaster risk reduction is worth doing. Thus, JICA is now developing an economic simulation model called Disaster Risk Reduction Investments Accounts for Development. This model may be a useful tool for explaining the effects of prior investment for disaster risk reduction to decision makers in developing countries. We will try to have as many occasions as possible to show this model from now on. I sincerely hope this model will contribute to the promotion of mainstreaming of DRR by accelerating the concept of the prior investment in each country. Lastly, I would like to reiterate your active participation in World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai in March of next year, as mentioned by His Excellency Minister Kihara in his statement. I hope post-Hyogo Framework for Action, which will be adopted at that conference, will highlight this mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction, as well as the importance of the investments in disaster risk reduction. We also hope the idea of disaster risk reduction will be included in post-2015 agenda. Outside of this room, you will find some stand explaining our activities on disaster risk reduction, and also you will find the brochure with regard to the This is a position paper of JICA's position paper on disaster risk reduction. You will find outside this room. Okay, I stop here. I hope my presentation comes through with your questions, Madam Akhtar. Thank you very much.
Okay, I believe we have had excellent perspectives and very comprehensive perspectives on natural disaster risk reduction. Regrettably, I have just been informed that we will not be able to invite questions and not be able to get responses given the time constraint, for which we sincerely apologize. With this, I'd like to thank our panelists who have shed interesting perspectives and really made excellent presentation. So a hand of applause for the panelists. Sorry, we can't ask questions because of the time issue.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Not at all.
Okay. Sorry then. One of the ministers are leaving, so we have to attend to them.
Okay.